What do you mean she was denied water? Julian Kent's voice cut through the boardroom like a blade, but no one had an answer. The room was quiet. 9 cafe locations, all doing modest business, but one store 6 on Oak Ridge Avenue had been drawing strange inconsistencies in its reports. High staff turnover, oddly low customer satisfaction, and now a whisper from a former employee about a waitress being refused a glass of water during a shift. It wasn't a reason he was going undercover, but it stuck in his head. Julian had bought the cafe chain 6 years ago from a retiring couple. It was a small, cozy brand with a loyal following. He'd grown it carefully 9 locations, each meant to feel local and personal. But lately, his gut told him something was off. He didn't want another filtered report. He wanted the truth. He chose Store 6. Not just because of the strange numbers, but because he'd never set foot in that location himself. Most of the staff there had been hired in the last year. They wouldn't know him, and thanks to the company's decision to keep ownership quiet, most staff just assumed it was a franchise. 2 days later, Julian walked in through the back door wearing a second-hand hoodie, black slacks, and a name tag that read Joel. His normally styled brown hair was flattened under a cap, and he'd grown out his beard just enough to change the shape of his face. He'd been placed as a new trainee dishwasher by the district manager, who had no idea who he really was. Julian made sure of it. "Hey, newbie," a short, wiry guy barked as soon as Julian stepped in. "You're late." His name tag read Rick Manager. Julian checked the clock. "I'm 5 minutes early." Rick rolled his eyes. "Then you're late to being early." He jerked his thumb toward the back sink. "Plates. Start scrubbing." Julian didn't argue. He got to work. The kitchen was hot and cramped, but manageable. What wasn't manageable was the tension. People moved around each other like they were afraid to breathe wrong. He watched as a waitress in her early 20s rushed past him, her curly black hair tied up, face flushed. She was balancing a tray with one hand, and her name tag read Harper. Harper was fast, polite, and clearly overwhelmed. Julian noticed she never stopped moving, always covering for someone else. She even helped the cook plate food during the lunch rush. Just after noon, Harper came back into the kitchen looking pale. She leaned against the counter for a second, breathing hard. "Rick," she said, wiping sweat off her neck. "Can I have a glass of water?" Rick didn't even glance at her. "You get water on break." "I've been on the floor for 5 hours, she said quietly. "Not my problem," he snapped. "You want water, clock out." Julian froze mid-scrape, holding a plate. The words hit harder than he expected. Harper blinked. "Seriously?" Rick shrugged. "Policy. You know it." "No, actually," she said, voice shaking now. "I don't think that's a real policy." Rick stepped closer. "Then maybe you need a reminder of who makes the rules around here." Julian put down the plate. "She's asking for water, man. Not a smoke break." Rick turned to him. "You don't speak unless spoken to, Joel." Julian stared at him. "You denying her water cause you can?" "Because I don't have time for drama. Stay in your lane." Julian clenched his jaw, but said nothing. Harper didn't say anything either. She just walked back out, still thirsty, still working. For the next few hours, Julian watched more closely. Orders were wrong because Rick ignored tickets. A busboy was yelled at for asking for gloves. The cook, an older man named Ed, looked like he was one more insult away from walking out. But Harper kept going. She helped a kid who spilled milk. She refilled a coffee for a woman who had just lost her husband. Julian overheard the conversation. And she did it all while trying not to pass out. That night, as the place emptied and Julian mopped the back floor, Harper sat outside on the curb, sipping from her own empty water bottle. Julian walked past Rick without a word. He stepped outside and sat beside her. "You okay?" he asked. "I'm fine," she said, clearly not. "You shouldn't have to ask for water." She looked over.
"Yeah, well,
I like my job. I need it, so I play the game." He nodded slowly, then stood. Not for long. She squinted at him. What does that mean? Julian gave her a tired smile. Means I'll see you tomorrow. He walked off without another word. But in his mind, things were already shifting. Tomorrow, the real work would start. The next morning started before sunrise. Julian arrived early, even before the prep cook, and sat in his car across the street, watching the cafe lights flicker on one by one. Inside, he knew nothing had changed yet. Rick was still in charge. Harper would show up and keep pushing through. And the customers? They'd walk in expecting warmth and leave with whatever the staff could manage under pressure. By the time he stepped inside, the smell of burnt toast already hung in the air. Ed, the cook, stood over the flat-top griddle, flipping bacon in silence. No greeting, just tired eyes beneath an old ball cap. Julian nodded to him and stepped into the back. Rick was already there, leaning against the stainless steel prep table with a coffee in hand. He didn't look up. Mop bucket's still full from last night. You didn't empty it. You told me to clock out before I finished. Rick gave a sharp laugh. If you're gonna be petty, you'll fit in just fine. Julian walked past without replying. He grabbed the mop bucket and wheeled it toward the sink. As he cleaned, he noticed a clipboard on the counter with the weekly schedule. 3 names were crossed out in red ink. No replacements listed. At 7:30, Harper walked in. Her shoulders were tense, hair tied low today, and her apron was already looped around her waist. She nodded to Julian once, then turned toward the register to prep for open. Where's Kat? She asked Rick. She quit. Harper blinked. So it's just me and Jonah today? Rick didn't answer. Instead, he stuffed his phone into his back pocket and walked into the office, closing the door behind him. Julian met Harper's eyes. She didn't say anything. She just reached for the iced coffee carafe and started pouring. By 8, the cafe was full. Julian was no longer in the dish pit. Rick had reassigned him to bussing tables, claiming they were short and he needed movable bodies. Julian didn't argue. It gave him eyes on the floor. He watched Harper cover the entire front of house. Jonah, a wiry kid who couldn't have been more than 19, manned the register, but Harper was everywhere else seating customers, taking orders, delivering food, even wiping tables between rushes. There was no host. No second server. No chance to breathe. At one point, a mother with 2 toddlers accidentally knocked over a glass of orange juice. Harper crouched down without hesitation, napkins in hand, talking softly to the kids so they wouldn't cry. Julian saw none of the manager's help. Rick remained in the back office. Just before 10, a problem walked in. A man in his 40s, with a Bluetooth earpiece and a crisp sports coat, stood in line at the register, shifting on his heels. When he reached the counter, he waved a hand at Jonah, without looking up from his phone. Large cappuccino, extra dry. And tell your girl to hurry up. I'm late. Jonah glanced at Harper, who was already working on 4 orders. It's just us this morning, sir. She'll get to it as fast as she can. The man scoffed. That's not my problem. Julian cleared a nearby table and moved slowly, listening. Harper walked over to retrieve the order slip. The man looked her over once. You always that slow? Or is today special? She didn't flinch. I'll get it out as quick as possible, sir. Try harder. I've seen high schoolers with better hustle. Julian stepped closer, wiping the next table. She's doing the work of 3 people. The man turned. And who are you? The janitor? Julian didn't blink. Something like that. Rick stepped out of the office just then, catching the tail end of the exchange. Instead of de-escalating, he crossed his arms. You're not paid to chat, Joel. Keep moving. Julian stared at him. You're just going to let him talk to her like that? Rick shrugged. If she can't handle customers, she's in the wrong job. Harper didn't say a word. She just turned back to the espresso machine. The cappuccino took 90 seconds. She slid it across the counter with a polite nod. The man took it, sipped, then grimaced. Too wet. Useless. He dumped it in the trash and walked out. Julian looked at Rick. Say something. Rick smiled faintly. That's the service industry, Joel. If she can't take heat. Julian dropped the rag onto the counter. Enough. Harper turned. Joel, don't. But he was already moving. He followed Rick toward the back, brushing past the swinging door into the kitchen. Ed looked up from the grill, sensing something had shifted. Julian shut the office door behind them both. Rick turned. You got a problem? Julian took off his cap. Yeah, I do. Rick narrowed his eyes. What are you doing? Julian reached into his pocket and pulled out his wallet. He flipped it open and laid his company ID on the desk. Rick stared. What the, Julian Kent, he said. Owner. I've been here for 2 days. You've failed both. Rick's mouth opened, but nothing came out. Julian kept his voice low. You berate staff, ignore safety, let customers humiliate your people, and you think that's just the job? You're done. Rick took a step forward. You can't just, you're fired. Now. There was no reaction from Rick this time. Just stunned silence. Julian stepped back into the kitchen. Ed raised an eyebrow, but said nothing. By the time Julian returned to the floor, Harper was clearing a table. He walked over, standing beside her. You good? He asked. Depends, she said, not looking up. You still Joel? No, he said. I'm Julian. She froze mid-wipe. He waited. Finally, she looked up. You're serious? I own the company. She blinked. So. What now? We start fixing it. She leaned against the booth for a second. You're not just passing through, are you? No, he said. I'm staying until it works. She nodded slowly, then went back to wiping the table. For the rest of the day, Julian worked beside her. Not watching, not directing, working. When the lunch rush hit, he took orders. When it slowed, he helped Jonah restock. He watched how Ed moved in the kitchen, how the flow broke down when too many tickets piled up. He noted the broken fridge door, the flickering light above the pastry case, the staff bathroom with the leaking pipe. Later that afternoon, he met with Harper in the back corner during a lull. I need your help, he said. She crossed her arms. With what? Hiring. Scheduling. Fixing the workflow. You know where it's broken better than anyone. I'm a waitress. No, he said. You're the one holding this place together. She looked at him for a long time. Then she nodded once. Julian turned to the register. Jonah was counting singles head down. You want more hours? Julian asked him. Jonah looked up, surprised. Yeah. Always. You'll get them. And a raise. Jonah's face lit up. Seriously? Julian nodded. Then turned to Ed. You still want to be here? Ed shrugged. I didn't stick around for Rick. You didn't stick around for him. You stayed for everyone else. Ed nodded once. That's fair. Julian clapped his hands. All right. Let's rebuild this thing. He didn't promise overnight change. He didn't pretend everything would be fine by tomorrow. But as the sun dipped behind the buildings and the last customer left satisfied, he knew one thing. The hard part had finally begun. By Friday morning, the mood felt different, but only slightly. The change in leadership hadn't yet reached the floor in any real way. One toxic manager gone didn't make the mounting dishes disappear, nor did it erase the exhaustion everyone wore on their faces. But there was a quiet shift in alertness, like people were waiting to see if this was real. Julian, back in the same hoodie and slacks, was already in the kitchen reassembling the broken shelving unit by the dry storage. He'd arrived an hour early, armed with a cordless drill and a list of repairs Harper had helped him draft the night before. Ed walked in balancing a crate of eggs against his hip. You don't sleep or something? Julian tightened a bolt. Only when things run right. That'll be a while. Julian nodded. Then I'll be here a while. Ed dropped the crate on the counter and started cracking eggs into a stainless bowl. You putting someone new in Rick's spot? Not yet. You running the shift? Until I find someone worth giving a key. Ed glanced over. Careful. That's how I ended up cooking 30 breakfasts a day. Julian chuckled quietly. Fair. At 6:50, Harper came in through the back door balancing a tray of wrapped pastries from the commissary. Her eyes flicked to the shelves. You fixed that already? Julian stood and wiped his hands. You said it was collapsing. Figured I'd start there. She set the tray down and pulled a thin notebook from her apron pocket. I made a list. Stuff we've just been working around. Julian opened it.
No fluff.
Just one item per line: fridge gasket, broom handle, loose faucet at hand wash station, missing light bulb in hallway, register drawer sticking. He closed it and tucked it into his back pocket. Keep adding to it. She nodded once, then headed to prep the pastry case. By the time the lights came on and Jonah unlocked the doors, the place looked the same to customers, but inside, it was running on a different current.
Tense, yes,
but watchful. The first problem came at 8:15. A woman in her late 50s walked in, sharp heels clicking against the floor. She wore pale lipstick and a gray blazer, her lanyard flashing a corporate badge. She headed straight toward the register. I'm looking for the general manager, she said. Julian stepped forward from the side counter, still wearing his apron. That was Rick. He's no longer with the company. The woman didn't blink. And you are?
Julian Kent.
She squinted. The Julian Kent? Julian nodded once.
I'm Terry.
Regional Compliance and HR. I got an anonymous call last night about a hostile work environment. The caller didn't give specifics, but mentioned this location. Harper had paused by the pastry case. Julian caught her eye, then turned back to Terry. We've addressed the immediate issue, but I'll walk you through current operations. Terry crossed her arms. I'll speak with staff individually. Julian gestured toward the back hallway. We can use the storage room. He spent the next 20 minutes covering Harper's section while Terry took employees one by one to speak privately. Jonah went first, then Ed. Harper was last. When she returned, she avoided Julian's gaze and walked straight to the drink station. He didn't press. Instead, he continued working the floor, clearing plates, checking in with customers, a young father with a toddler, a pair of elderly women splitting a cinnamon roll, 2 college students glued to their laptops. At 9:30, Terry reappeared beside him. We're filing a formal report on Rick, she said flatly. 3 employees described sustained intimidation, verbal humiliation, and denied breaks. 1 mentioned being pressured to work double shifts without overtime pay. Julian didn't react. I also found inconsistencies in his clock edits. He was adjusting time cards without consent. He's already gone. Terry nodded. You made the right call. We'll audit the past 3 pay periods. If there's back pay owed, we'll process it immediately. Thank you.
She paused.
You've got a staff trying hard to survive, but they're not going to last unless changes happen fast. I know. She studied him a second longer. You're doing something rare. Just don't burn out before they rebuild.
With that, she left.
The lunch rush hit hard. A local office had ordered 15 meals online, all marked to go. Julian jumped behind the line with Ed to help plate while Harper and Jonah juggled dine-in. They were understaffed. Every movement had to count. Julian moved quickly, taking the boxed orders to the front. Harper was restocking cups while taking a customer's order. Her voice was calm, movements precise, but her shoulders were tight. After this rush, go take 10, Julian said, passing behind her.
I'm fine.
You're not.
She didn't argue.
Just nodded once. At 1:15, the cafe quieted. Harper stepped out back and sat on a crate by the delivery door. Julian brought her a glass of cold water and sat beside her. You told HR?
Yeah.
You didn't have to. I did. He waited. She took a sip of water. Rick docked my time twice. Said I left early when I didn't. I was scared to push it. You're going to be paid for every minute. She nodded. I'm putting you on the schedule as lead server. Not just because you've earned it, but because I need someone in that role who actually listens. I've never been a lead. You already are. She looked at the water in her hands. What happens when you leave? I don't leave until this place runs without breaking people. She didn't speak, but she didn't look away either. Inside, Jonah was helping a customer pay with a gift card that wouldn't scan. Julian stepped in to override the system. It was a minor glitch, but one that had been happening for weeks. No one had reported it. That evening, after the cafe closed, Julian called an all-staff meeting.
Just the four of them.
I can't promise we'll fix everything by next week, but I can promise we'll fix what we control. Starting Monday, we'll have a cleaner on rotation twice a week.
Repairs are underway.
And we're hiring. Ed leaned against the counter. How many? 2 servers, 1 part-time cook. Harper raised an eyebrow. You think they'll stay? Only if we give them a reason to. Jonah looked between them. So, what do we do until then? We hold the line, Julian said. And we stop pretending that burnout is just part of the job. No one applauded. No one cheered. But they all stayed after the meeting to help restock and prep for morning. That was more than enough. The following week moved like wet cement. Every shift was a grind, each hour accounted for, every movement deliberate. Julian stayed embedded inside the cafe, not as a guest owner dropping in, but as a working member of the team. The staff had mostly adjusted to his presence, but there were moments, pauses in conversation, uncertain glances where it was clear they still expected the rug to be pulled out. No grand announcements had been made outside the store. Customers weren't told anything had changed, but the regulars noticed. Food came out more consistently. Orders were no longer lost in the shuffle. And Harper, now officially listed as lead server on the schedule, had begun quietly organizing the front of house. She didn't ask for authority. She just started using it. Jonah, the syrup bottles need refilling before the 10 o'clock crowd. Go ahead and rewrap the pastry display. It's looking uneven. Ed, I'm going to trial a new table rotation so we don't bottleneck on the left side. It wasn't barked out. It was steady, observational, and backed by logic. And no one pushed back not because of her title, but because she was right. Julian watched it unfold from behind the line and knew the rebuild was gaining traction. But the stress hadn't vanished. If anything, it was sharpening. The cafe was still short-staffed. Everyone was picking up slack. The only difference now was that they believed it was temporary. By Wednesday, one of the new hires arrived, Nina, a calm, even-voiced woman in her early 30s with 5 years of breakfast shift experience. During her interview, she'd asked one question: does the manager still yell at people in front of customers? Julian had answered her with a simple, no. And that's permanent. Nina's first shift was tight. She shadowed Harper through the floor, picking up the rhythm quickly, but Julian could see her eyes tracking everything: ticket times, how I'd communicated from the past, the way Jonah handled payment issues. She didn't say much, but by closing, she'd already reorganized the silverware drawer and written down 2 suggestions for improving ticket pacing. She didn't hand them in. Julian found them tucked into the back of the prep log. That was more telling than anything. Thursday brought the hardest moment since Rick's removal. It was just after 11 when a man entered, dressed in athletic gear, sunglasses still on despite being indoors. He ordered a triple-shot espresso and avocado toast. Paid in cash. Sat near the window. When Harper brought the food, he didn't look up. She set the plate down, gave her standard, "Enjoy your meal," and turned away. He called after her.
Hey.
You forgot to smile. She stopped mid-step. Turned back, slowly. Excuse me? You're in hospitality. he said, finally looking up. That means making people feel welcome. You bring food to the table with that face, and it kills the vibe. Julian heard it from the back and was already moving. Harper didn't raise her voice. You've got your order. If you need anything else, ask at the counter. The man scoffed. That's the attitude? No wonder this place is half empty. Julian stepped in. Sir, that's enough. The man leaned back in his chair. Who are you? I'm the person asking you to stop speaking to my staff like that. I'm a paying customer. You're also out of line. The man stood. You're seriously going to throw me out? Julian didn't blink. Yes. The man looked around, waiting for someone to object. No one did. Jonas stood at the register still. Nina was checking the sanitizer levels, watching quietly. Even Ed had paused behind the line. The man grabbed his plate. I'll take my food to go. No, Julian said. You can leave it. The man set the plate down harder than necessary and walked out without another word. The door slammed behind him. Harper exhaled and turned back to the pass. Thanks. Julian didn't respond. He just walked to the window, flipped the espresso cup upside down, and returned to the kitchen. That night, after close, Harper stayed behind while the others went home. She was wiping down menus at one of the booths, going slower than usual. I wasn't shocked, she said.
Not by what he said.
Just that someone stepped in. Julian leaned against the counter. That shouldn't be rare. She nodded. It's not just here. That kind of stuff, it's everywhere. Doesn't matter what you say, how clean your uniform is. Some people just decide you owe them sunshine. I'm not running a place where dignity comes second to a sale. Then this place might actually last. Friday brought the second new hire, Luis, a former line cook who'd recently been laid off from a hotel kitchen uptown. He was in his 40s, soft-spoken, moved with confidence, but didn't overstep. On his first day, he noticed the prep fridge was running warm. Instead of flagging it verbally, he brought over a thermometer and confirmed it was 5 degrees too high. Quietly, he showed Ed, who nodded once and shifted cold items into the walk-in. That night, Julian ordered a new seal kit and logged the issue. He didn't say anything to Luis. Actions had already spoken. By Saturday, the cafe ran differently. Not smoother, there were still delays, still overwhelmed during peak, but the structure was there. Nina had begun quietly mentoring Jonah on register pacing. Harper was delegating drink station tasks without hesitation. Ed was actually taking 5-minute breathers between rushes with no guilt. And Julian was no longer needed on every corner of the floor. He still worked the line, still cleared plates, still checked in. But for the first time, he wasn't holding the walls up with his shoulders. Mid-afternoon, while restocking napkins, he heard Harper call out from the coffee counter. Julian, can you take table 9 their check? He walked it over. The man at the table was older, polite. He'd been reading a paperback while sipping coffee. When he took the check, he looked up. You new here? Something like that. Well, I've been coming here for years. Last couple months, it felt like the soul of the place was leaking out. But this week, he tapped the table. Feels like it's back. Julian nodded once. Appreciate that. The man smiled. Tell whoever's in charge not to mess it up again. I'll pass it along. That night, the team closed in record time. No one said it, but there was a quiet sense of pride. The place had survived its worst days. It wasn't fixed, not yet, but it was alive. Julian stayed behind after everyone left. He walked the floor slowly, checking the corners, the windows, the coffee station. He wiped a fingerprint off the pastry case glass, pulled the schedule from the office printer, and pinned it to the corkboard. Before locking up, he left a note on the counter. Just 4 words, printed in thick marker. This place matters again. Then he shut off the lights and stepped into the night, knowing tomorrow would be another long shift, but finally, no longer a broken one.